had his 2023 season cut short after tearing a ligament in his throwing wrist in Week 11. Burrow has been throwing regularly and faced no limits during OTAs. Burrow had this to say about his return on the Pardon My Take podcast. You don't play football, people forget about you. If you're not out there and people aren't watching you, there's nothing to talk about. I'm going to give people something to talk about this year, and I'm excited about it. We bring back in my guy, Sam Acho. Sam, do you feel like Burrow should be the MVP favorite this season?
No, I don't think he can be the MVP favorite this season for a couple reasons. I think the first reason is this: you're coming off of an injury, and there has been a history of injury in your career. And so if I'm thinking, okay, who's going to be my favorite to be the MVP, it'd be hard-pressed for me to say a guy who was injured about half of the season last year. That's kind of part one. And then part two, because you go to outside of that, man, Joe Burrow the years before that put up some solid stats, over 4,000 yards, 30-plus touchdowns. But then you look at like some of the other offensive numbers that are putting up, they are gaudy. Guys like Dak Prescott, now with Mike McCarthy calling plays, can put up gaudy MVP-like numbers. Tua Tagovailoa led the league in passing last year. Gaudy MVP-type numbers. And so those are just a few of the reasons why I don't think Joe Burrow should be an MVP favorite. But if he stays healthy, he'll definitely be in the MVP conversation.
He's my MVP, and I think you need to put these injuries aside because he's shown us. Remember how bad of a season, like how bad last season started out for the Cincinnati Bengals? He misses a lot of training camp due to the calf injury. Those first 4 or 5 games are just awful. Like the team had fallen off. And then all of a sudden, week 5, they start playing their best football. Why? Because of Joe Burrow. Like he put them into, hey, this team might be a playoff team through a 4-game stretch where he threw 10 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, was averaging 283 passing yards a game, and looked like an MVP candidate at that point. Then, of course, there was the wrist injury that ends up putting him out for the season, something he had to have surgery on, and now in what he's coming back from. Look at the weapons around him, whether it's his tight end and Mike Gesicki to T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, so on and so forth. This is a high-powered offense, and they've shown you, even at their weakest points, even when the pass protection isn't great, they are still that unit because they've got Joe Burrow behind the line, under center. And I struggle when I take a look at what the odds are right now because he's not the odds-on favorite. Patrick Mahomes is, but Patrick Mahomes wasn't an MVP candidate last year in the regular season. There were all these changes within his personnel and within the offense that he had to overcome on his way to, winning the Super Bowl, which obviously matters more to any player than winning the MVP. But I still have questions about Kansas City's offense and what those receivers are going to look like. The health of Hollywood Brown, taking a look at the suspensions that are potentially coming down the line as well on that team for some other receivers. But Joe Burrow, to me, is the easy answer here because he's shown us that despite injuries that have plagued him throughout his career, he's always been in that mix. I think this is the year, even in a loaded AFC North, where he's able to take that, get above that final hurdle, which, very well could be the Baltimore Ravens and the reigning MVP this year.
For me, I'm going to go with Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes. He's the standard in the National Football League, and I love their additions. This offense for Kansas City was not explosive a year ago, but you add the fastest player ever in Xavier Worthy. You add Hollywood Brown. So now that adds another dimension to their offense and something else that the defense has to be mindful of. And that's also going to allow more room underneath for Travis Kelce, for Rashee Rice. I think it's going to allow that run game to be even more, valuable than it has been the last few seasons. Isaiah Pacheco is someone who can, thrive off of that because teams are going to try to play cover 2, right? They're going to try to play those 2 high safeties and not let those 2 speedsters get behind them from a defensive standpoint. So I like Patrick Mahomes in those regards. We're talking about a guy when the moment becomes the biggest, he always shows up. He has not let us down up until this point since being a starter in the National Football League. But I'm going to bring up some other guys, too. Don't sleep on C.J. Stroud with the weapons that he has.
Yeah.
He has 3 number 1s in Houston. He has a tight end. They have Joe Mixon at the running back position. They got better defensively. C.J. Stroud also showed us when it was time to be clutch and the football had to be in his hands late in the game, that he can make the play. Let's not forget what he was able to do to the Cleveland Browns, which was a top defense last season in the playoff game in the first round last season. C.J. Stroud and company, they ate that defense up. And also, don't sleep on Jordan Love. I want to see how Jordan Love is going to be able to build off his first year as a starter. And now he has Josh Jacobs at the running back position. And if Jeff Hafley gets that defense right in Green Bay, and that defense is able to give him extra possessions and more times to have the football, don't sleep on those two young cats who made their first year starting in 2023. But I like Patrick Mahomes.
The funny thing is when we bringing it back to what our conversation was earlier with Damian Woody, like Dak Prescott finished number 2 in MVP voting last year. How come none of us have him as like our MVP favorite?
Well, I think it's more so because what they lost offensive line-wise, you look at the situation right now with CeeDee Lamb, they have to pay CeeDee Lamb, in my opinion. He is their offense. They don't have a run game. So if CeeDee Lamb is not there, then we might see a drop-off. But if CeeDee Lamb is there, I still see Dak Prescott thriving and having a good year. It's a year that he can be an unrestricted free agent, which players dream of.
Yeah.
Especially from that position, you don't see guys being able to be in that situation. So I still have Dak as a top quarterback in the NFL. It's just how's that offensive line and those pieces being replaced, how they're going to be able to gel for the Dallas Cowboys.
Sam, give me the final word. And then
you have Dak. Definitely, well, the final word for me is this. You have Dak playing essentially on a contract year. That's part one. That's a guy who could be a favorite. You have C.J. Stroud, who just got Stephon Diggs, who just came off of a 4,000 offensive rookie of the year. That's a guy who could be a favorite. Jordan Love, his last 7 games, was 19 touchdowns, 1 interception, was going crazy. That's another MVP candidate. So there's so many, for me, people who should be favored higher than Joe Burrow, right? Joe Burrow could be in that conversation, but those are guys who, they were good last year and they're ascending this year. Joe Burrow's got to get back to that.
15-game season. On Pardon My Take, he said, got to have 2 bye weeks, and I think it'd be cool to do normal bye weeks like it is now. Have it spread out. But then, like week 13, do the Pro Bowl break where you have the 7-on-7 and all the skills challenges like the NBA does, because I think that would give more ratings for the Pro Bowl, and then it would also give everybody that bye week going into the last 6 games of the year. All right, Harry, Sam, you guys both obviously played in the NFL, and Courtney, we know you cover it. Sam, do you have any issues with Burrow supporting that 18-game season? Because we know those NFL bodies take a beating.
Yeah, I have a lot of issues with Joe Burrow's comments, and part of the reason why is that not only did I play in the NFL, but I served as a vice president of NFL Players Association for 4 years during negotiations for the new CBA that got the 17th game. Here's my only issue, right? I don't think that Joe Burrow outright said, hey, I want to go get 18 games, but if you're going to make a comment like that, you got to get something more than you give, right? So what does an NFL player need? Okay, if you're going to get an 18th game, boom, I need to go from 48% revenue share, which is what the guarantee right now is, to 50% or 51%. Like, that needs to happen. Pensions and 401ks need to increase, right? Like, the match right now is 28K or 30K. It needs to go to 35 or 45K. Like, you need to start getting, if the conversation is going to start to happen, whether in the public discourse, in the media, or private behind closed doors, these conversations about increase in benefits, increase in minimum salary, it's supposed to be $1 million by 2030, the minimum salary. Hey, it needs to be $1 million right now for rookies. For veterans, it needs to be up to $3 million, guys who have played 7 years or more. Like, those fine details are the things that need to be gotten before players give away another game. An extra game is extra toll, extra wear and tear on players' bodies. And the reason that brings up an issue is that the chance of injury, right? There's a 100% injury rate in the NFL. And so going from 14 games, which it was years ago, to 16 games, now to 17 games. Now all of a sudden you add not a wild card game, a super wild card game. And sure, the preseason is lower, but a lot of players didn't play in the preseason anyways. These are star players. So, like, you need to get higher salaries, players, all players, higher minimums. You need, whether it's retirement, 401k, pension, like, get that, and also take care of the former players as well. So there are so many stipulations, if I'm Joe Burrow, knowing that I'm a star quarterback, face of the league, that I would have added, even in a flippant conversation like that. It needs to be, yeah, I'll do 18 games, but only if we get X, Y, Z, and A, B, C, D as well.
It felt like having one of your faces of the league speak out about this and the way that he did it. So he kind of just simplified it. He said, 2 bye weeks, a Pro Bowl during the league-wide, like week 13 bye that everybody would have. That's not enough. And that gives the owners leverage when you're hearing that coming from someone of Joe Burrow's stature. All of this is a conversation because the NFL floated the idea earlier this summer about a proposed change to the offseason schedule, which would end up doing away with OTAs more or less, and then just having the 6-week ramp-up period until they go into training camp. Now, there's a lot of pushback with people I've talked to in the NFL about that sort of schedule. Players, front office personnel, coaches, all combined. I don't think a lot of people like that idea. Bottom line, if it comes to an 18-game schedule, and Sam, you and I talked about this in the pre-show meeting, like the second bye week is mandatory. Like, you can't even start the conversation unless that is in the language. But the players need to be paid more for 18 games. It can't be the same amount that they're being paid for 17 games, then just stretched out to play that 18th game. So the revenue share, the NFL media rights deal, all of the things that we know will be coming down the pipeline by the time this ends up getting ratified, because we know it's happening. Like, this wasn't just floated, out there as like a possibility for 18 games. The same thing happened when they went from 16 to 17. So the biggest thing players are going to want here is to see 18 games reflected in their paycheck, because it's wear and tear, it's the physical toll, the mental toll that you have to take, and ultimately being paid for your services and not just having your money spread out over 18 games versus 17.
I think everything that Courtney mentioned, and also you, Sam, are great points and great things that you brought up. I want to bring up one more other thing. Roster sizes need to be increased. We need a bigger roster size. We need more players to be able to dress out on game day. We need more players to have an opportunity, bigger practice squad unit. If you're going to take this to 18 games, and I agree with both of y'all, don't tell me we're going to go to 18 games and we have to bargain with 2 bye weeks. Don't tell me you're about player safety if we have to bargain about 2 bye weeks. But Sam, what you mentioned, from the 401k to the benefits, and Courtney, everything that you mentioned, all that has to be in the equation as well. It just can't be, we want 2 bye weeks. No, another game, people don't understand this, Sam, and I want the world to listen. When football players play a game on Sunday, and you got to go back to practice on Wednesday, do y'all really know the body is not fully recovered? The body has not even recovered from a Sunday game. You are still feeling the nicks and bruises on Wednesday. You're feeling it on Thursday, and then you got to go out on another Sunday to play a football game.
But sometimes you have to play Thursday. That's why Thursday night football was always wild to me. That turnaround is unbelievable.
And the injury rate, Molly, it's not just the turnaround, it's the injury rate on Thursday night football. You got to play on Sunday, and then you play on Thursday. Now there's Saturday games, and all of a sudden, okay, Sunday to Saturday. Like, that's the stuff that I don't think people give enough credence to. The salary matters, but man, those injuries happen a lot, and that's your career. Your body, your human capital for a football player, your physical capital is the way you make money. So if you get injured and you can no longer play ever, now you have to find a new career. That's why that extra game matters so much to so many players.
Yeah, and also I think for Joe Burrow, he's chomping at the bit. Obviously, he missed last season. He wants to get back out there. He's excited.